Okay guys, so today I'm teaching you how to play the Demon Rush trading card game. Now the first thing you need to do is get a structure deck. You have to play with a champion and he's always going to be on the battlefield at all times. He goes in the middle, equips go behind him, soldiers go in front of him, and these zones with the playmat really help a lot just for beginners, especially to figure out where everything goes. You actually don't need a playmat. If you see these zone areas, if you know how it works, you can play without one, but I definitely encourage you to get one. It not only helps you with the zones and organize things, but protects your cards as well. And you can get all of this stuff on shop.demonrush.com. You can get the sleeves, the cards, the playmats, everything. So at the beginning of every turn, you start with 10 Imperium. And you actually see here on the playmat that there's an 11 and a 12 because there are cards in the game that will increase your limit, so potentially could go really far up, but you're probably not going to go over 12. How do I read a card? In the top left, you will see the cost of the card. In the bottom right, you will see both the strength of the card and its type, and then here in the description box will obviously give you a description. Here is the name in this box, and then up here in the top right will show the faction of the card. Now, if you don't have a playmat, you could just use 2 dice. This is how I originally was doing it before I created the playmats. So I just start with 10, and then say I played a spell that cost 2, I would just use the dice to keep track. You could also use a calculator or a notepad or something like that. But again, the playmat really helps with just the organizing Imperium and all of that. So you're gonna roll a dice with your opponent to see who goes first. And you can go holy against holy, or evil against evil, or holy against evil. It doesn't matter which faction you are. Right now there's only 2 factions, which is holy and evil. And in the next set, we're actually going to have the neutral faction. So there's some neutral cards as well, like this, which is green. And let me just go ahead and show you the differences. So blue cards are holy cards. Only holy decks can use blue cards and green cards. They cannot use red cards, which are evil. But the evil deck can use red cards and green cards. So because green cards are neutral, any deck can use them. Now, say I go first, I start by drawing 5 cards in my hand and then 1 for my turn. So at the beginning of every turn, draw 1 card. And simultaneously, my opponent is also going to have 5 cards in his hand. And that's important because in the first time, he might have some spells to stop your gameplay, like Contradict or Chains of Destruction. So you have to be aware on your first turn that you're not just going off, because your opponent can respond even if they're second. And they also start with 10 Imperium, even though they start second. So the interesting thing about that is, say they go second, you play something like, say I play Church of Dominus, which is a structure, and goes here, it kind of stays permanently on the battlefield, and he counters with Contradict. That would destroy this, and also on the beginning of his turn, he'll go back up to 10. So you have to be a little bit careful about your first turn plays. But let's go ahead and just play a hand, and I can kind of explain to you how the game works. First of all, both champions have an ability. So Soren has a particular ability that once per turn, you can spend 2 Imperium, I'll just go ahead and do it now, to draw a card and then discard 1 card. So I'm going to go ahead and discard Jacob, the Paladin of Light. So right here above your deck is called the Cemetery. Anytime a soldier is destroyed or a spell is used or destroyed, it goes into the Cemetery. Some cards can fetch cards from the Cemetery, but not too much. And there's also the term Vanquish. If a card is vanquished, it means it's removed from the game entirely. So just put it behind your playmat or something like that. So I just spent 2 to use Soren's effect, which brings me down to 8. And now I'm going to play my structure spell, Church of Dominus. That costs 4. Now Church of Dominus increases the strength of all my holy fighters by +1 strength, increases my Imperium limit to 11. So next turn I'll start at 11. And all holy fighters and spells cost 1 less Imperium to play. It's a very, very strong structure card. Real quick note, there's soldiers, there's your champion, and then fighter is a term that means either soldier or a champion. So if all fighters gain +1 strength, that means your champion gets +1 and all of your soldiers also get +1. But if the card just said your soldiers get +1, then your champion would not get buffed. Now I'm going to play Prayer Beads, which replenishes 2, and I get to draw a card. And notice that this cost 1 originally, but it doesn't cost me anything now because I have the Church of Dominus. So I draw my card, and look at that, I drew into an angel. So I have 6 left, and Prayer Beads is a very good card, so I want that back. So I'm going to play Jacob, the Paladin of Light. He costs 3, and then I can spend 3, 1, 2, 3, puts me at 0 to add a card back from the cemetery to my hand. Now, very important to note, if your opponent destroys the soldier as he's using his effect, he won't get the effect. Soldiers have to, and structures as well, have to remain on the field to resolve, meaning that if you try and activate any effect of a soldier or a structure or an equip spell, and your opponent destroys it first, then it will not get the effect. And that's very important to know because it's a form of negation. I would still have to pay the 3 cost for Jacob's effect, but if my opponent counters with Chains of Destruction, it destroys 1 card on the battlefield. That will prevent Jacob from getting his effect, and I still lose my 3 Imperium that I tried to use on that effect.
Another quick note, you can end your turn pretty much whenever you want to. You don't have to be out of Imperium. You could literally just pass if you want to. But once you get to the point where you can't play any more cards and you've already attacked, you typically want to end your turn. Now, on your very first turn, you cannot attack. So Sorendek here went first. He can't play Jacob and just attack. He's going to play some spells, set up his structure, and then pass over to his opponent.
So let's say my opponent goes for their turn and they play Nefarious Rock. Now, this card is 10 strength. So what happens if he attacks my Jacob, who only has 3 strength? Jacob will die, but I take no damage, unless the card specifically says it has a piercing effect. Just the soldier will die. Now, the way that you do damage to your opponent, both players start with 30 health, and the way that you get that your opponent's health to 0 and win the game is you would have to attack directly. If your opponent has soldiers on the battlefield, they act as a wall, and you have to clear out all those soldiers before your soldiers can attack your opponent's champion. So if I attack the Sorin, who actually has 2 strength now because Church of Dominus bumped him up, I would take the difference. So I would take 8 health damage, which is still quite a bit. And the reason for that is the champions have 1 strength on them. And then now my structure is giving me an extra +1 up to 2. So 10 minus 2 is 8. 8 health damage. Now there's also equip spells like this, Flaming Sword. Equip spells you can equip either to your soldiers or you can equip it to your champion. So if I had this Flaming Sword on my Sorin, which pumps him up another +2 strength, he would be at 4, and then I don't only take 6 damage. Equip spells and boosting strength is very strong in this game, so don't underestimate strength boosting cards. So let's say my opponent played Nefarious Rock, destroyed my Jacob. That cost him 10 Imperium, so he's going to be at 0 and he's going to end his turn. Now it's going to be back to me, and as I draw for my turn, I also replenish back to my limit, which now is 11 because of Church of Dominus. So now I'm going to play an angel. I'm going to play Zadkiel, the Angel of Righteousness. He costs 10, which you can see up here, and this will put me at 1 Imperium left. And Zadkiel's effect is to destroy 1 card on the battlefield, so I will destroy the Nefarious Rock. Now I still have 1 left and I can keep going. I can play Prayer Beads, which will replenish 2 for free because of the Church of Dominus and allow me to draw a card. And now I have a whole slew of protection and counter spells in my hand. With this 3, I can use Body Obstruction or Contradict and Sleeping Potion. So I know I have 3 left, and I'm going to be able to use a combination of 2 of these 3 on my opponent's turn. This one negates spells, this one negates and destroys soldiers, and Sleeping Potion will basically put a soldier to sleep for a turn. It can't attack or use its effects, which is extremely strong. So now, when it's my opponent's turn, if he tries to play Chains of Destruction to destroy my Zadkiel, I can spend 2 and contradict it. That will negate and destroy the effect of the Chains of Destruction, and it resolves backwards. Now, there's also the possibility, though, that my opponent has his own contradict. And if that happens, then that contradict will negate my contradict from negating the Chains of Destruction. So the responses work backwards, and basically the last card played is going to triumph. And let's just say that for the sake of this battle, that happened, and then all of the cards will go to the cemetery, and that would destroy my Zadkiel. Now, angels have a secondary effect that when they are sent to the cemetery, you get to replenish 10 Imperium. So I'm going to go back up to 10. My opponent's probably going to do some things and then pass back to me. So I'm going to draw for my turn. I have a lot of spells here, but no soldiers. So I probably want to use Sorin's effect and prayer beads and just try and draw into more soldiers to do combat. So first I'm going to use Sorin's effect. I started 11 by paying 2 to draw a card. That's a very good soldier I just got, but now I have to discard one, and I'll discard Pristine Coffin, which is a very good spell, but all of the cards in my hand are good. Now I'm going to use Prayer Beads to go back up to 11 and draw another card. You can see how powerful these Prayer Beads are. One of the best cards for the Holy deck, just consistent drawing and replenishment. So now I'm back at my max, and I'm going to play Great Bird of Destiny because I need to get some damage onto my opponent. Now, Great Bird of Destiny costs 9. That will put me at 2. And his effect is when he's rallied, you get to draw a card and show it to your opponent. If it's a spell, you can activate it at 0 cost. Rallying means play. If I ever play a soldier, it's called rally. If I resurrect it from the cemetery, it's always called rallying. There's no special rally or anything like that. Playing a soldier is rallying that soldier. So I say I rally Great Bird of Destiny, activate his effect to reveal Ancient Coin. This is not a spell that, it is a spell, but it's not a spell that can be activated. It only works when it's discarded. So that's just gonna go to my hand, and I'm just gonna attack him for probably 6 damage at this point. Now I still have 2 left, so I can probably keep my Great Bird alive with either Body Obstruction or Sleeping Potion, and that's why it's very important to maintain some Imperium at the end of your turn to use for your defensive spells and your protection spells. So let's say my opponent used some sort of effect like this guy, and he wants to use his effect, and I say no, and that would cost me the rest and destroy his guy. Now I'm going to go back to my turn and draw. I drew another protection spell. I like to run a lot of them in decks because it's very important to keep your soldiers alive. That's how you're going to win the game. And it also can give you a huge advantage on your opponent. For example, that card Chains of Destruction costs 5 Imperium, and if my opponent plays this, I can protect my guy with a card that only costs 1. And that's very important because my opponent just wasted most of his offense that turn, and I pretty much prevented my soldier from dying almost free. Now, let me tell you more about structures. You can have as many structures as you want with different names in your structure zone, and they'll just sit there continually buffing your team. Now, the only thing is you can't have 2 structures of the same name in your structure zone. So I can have Church of Dominus and Tower of Babel, but I cannot have 2 Towers of Babel or 2 Churches of Dominus on the battlefield at the same time. Now let's talk about armor. So angelic armor is an example of an armor. Now the difference between an armor and an equip spell, which you can tell by the little symbol here, which will tell you what type of card it is armors can only be equipped to your champion, and you can only have 1 armor equipped to your champion at a time. They're usually extremely powerful, and so you can also equip your champion with multiple items. That's fine, but it can only have 1 armor. And by the way, armors and structure spells and equips can only be played on your turn. So for example, if my opponent attacked my Great Bird with Nefarious Rock that is higher strength, I can't play a structure from my hand on my opponent's turn. I have to do those on my turn. Okay, let's talk about Greater Beings. So in your Sorin structure deck, it will come with Cassiel, the Angel of Honor. And you'll see here that he has this crown symbol instead of the traditional sword symbol from the rest of regular soldiers. Now, Greater Beings, the crown symbol, they're still a soldier, but they're called a Greater Being because there's a lot of cards in the game that simply do not work on them. An example would be Cosmic Energy, which says destroy 1 soldier on the battlefield except a Greater Being. So I could destroy a Great Bird of Destiny with it, but I couldn't destroy Cassiel, the Angel of Honor with it. You just have to look at the card and see whether or not it signifies that it cannot be used on Greater Beings. If it doesn't say anything, like Chains of Destruction just says destroy one card on the battlefield, then you can use Chains of Destruction to destroy greater beings. And the reason I put this in the game is because there needs to be removal. Okay, so let me introduce you to team attacking. Now, a lot of times your opponent will have a soldier that is so powerful that even your pretty tough, beefy soldiers just simply can't get over it by themselves. Now, if it's your turn, you can do something called a team attack. There's no team defense, just a team attack. And in that case, these two soldiers can combine their attacks onto one target. And this would work perfectly here because Luxardial has 12 strength, Primal Bear has 5, and Pavana has 8. So 5 plus 8 is 13. She only has 12, meaning they could combine their attacks and destroy her. And the other great thing about this is that when you do this, your soldiers that gain effects when they destroy another soldier will still gain that effect. And for example, Pavana, the Cherished Templar here, says when she destroys an enemy soldier by combat and sends it to the cemetery, you can draw one card and replenish one Imperium. Now, if they team attack, they can't attack again this turn unless the card specifically states that it can attack twice per turn. And let's talk about the different types of cards that there are. So there's regular spells on all three factions, Holy, Neutral, and Evil. There's equip spells on all three factions, Angelic Armor, Demonic Armor, and there's a neutral armor called Leviathan's Hide. Now we have structure spells, which will go in your structure zone. This is an evil one, this is a holy one. There's no neutral structures in the game yet. And again, you can tell that it's a structure by the identifier down here in the bottom right of the card. Now there's three types of soldiers in the game. You have your evil soldiers, which you can tell by the red specific border, the holy soldiers, which you can tell by the silver-ish border, and then you have the neutral soldiers, which either deck can use, which have this kind of earthy border to it. And then we have greater beings from both sides, like this for evil and this for holy. Holy greater beings will have the golden border, and the evil greater beings will have this very demonic looking rippled border. These are the most powerful cards in the game. They're legendary rare, and you're gonna wanna collect as many greater beings of different names that you can in order to have a very powerful deck. You can play up to 3 of any card in your deck. So you could play 3 Warhorse and 3 Hellspawn in your evil deck, but you can only play 1 of each greater being, and that's because they're just a little too powerful and too rare. So greater beings, that's another thing with their identifier, is that you can only run 1 per deck of that name. But there's 6 evil greater beings and there's 6 angels so currently in production. So you can run a total of 6 greater beings if you have them all. And if you do, your deck's probably gonna be insanely powerful. Now in combat between soldiers, you have to have a higher strength than the enemy soldier in order to destroy it. Both of these soldiers have 5 strength, so if Arcog tried to attack my Primal Bear, nothing would happen. They kind of just bounce off each other, they clash, and that's the end of it. And if your soldier has higher strength than mine will just simply die from the attack, go to the cemetery, and that's the end of it. I don't take piercing damage. And my opponent will have to do that to clear the way so he can start attacking my champion. And then I will take the difference in damage, 12 minus 1 in this case, I would take 11 damage. So you can refer to this video anytime you need a question about the rules. You can reach out to me on Twitter at DemonRushTM or at Mastar Media. But most importantly, the rules are on DemonRush.com, and you can probably figure out most of your questions there. Who are you guys gonna choose, evil or holy? Get out there and battle your friends. I can't wait to see some gameplay videos, and get at it.